Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home, the show dedicated to helping veterinarians, vet techs, dog trainers, shelter and rescue workers, pet sitters, and all the other animal-crazy pet professionals manage their stress and find more joy. I'm your host, Colleen Pilar, and I'm thrilled you're here with us today. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on your favorite app so that you won't miss a single episode. This episode is brought to you by our free community, the Circle of Resilient and Thriving Pet Professionals. If you like the ideas shared here, then you're invited to continue the conversation with other lifelong learners in the community. You can find out more at colleenpilar.com. It's the perfect place for you to learn cool stuff, feel good, and take action to create the life you love. Come join us. Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Kelly Bremkin, and she is a licensed veterinary social worker who works at the Oregon Humane Society. And I realized just as I said that I misstated how your title goes. It's veterinary social worker or licensed clinical social worker. Like that's how those break out, the letters. Is that true?
Yeah. So here at the Oregon Humane Society, I'm listed as a veterinary social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And in the state of Oregon, I'm currently a clinical social work associate. So I'm working on my licensure. So
Okay.
the state of Oregon is one of the toughest ones for licensure. So I have all my hours and I'm just getting ready to sit for my national board
Awesome. Good luck. When are you planning to do that?
in the next week.
In the next 3 weeks. How exciting.
quick.
And you agreed to take time to talk to me. I am honored.
Ready.
Thank you so much. Well,
Yeah.
so as I stumbled over that, one of the reasons I did is because it's not that well known. I've interviewed a few veterinary social workers on my show, and I think it's such a needed thing. But first off, can you just start us off with, what does that mean? What is a veterinary social worker?
That is a great question. I think that social work as a whole can sometimes be misunderstood. And I like to remind folks that social work is actually a protected title. So there are social workers. We are the largest professional group of mental health, like clinicians.
Mhm.
And we work with different populations. And our goal is really to walk alongside folks and help them live be the best them possible. And so there are some social workers who work with school-age children, or they work in human medicine, oncology, or emergency medicine for people. And veterinary social work is just working with a population focused on the human-animal bond. So I think that lots of folks have social workers in their lives who work with lots of different populations. This is just a population focused on the human-animal bond. For
Mhm.
many of us, that can mean that we are working in an academic setting where we're working with a college of vet med or a college of social work. We can be working in a veterinary emergency or specialty clinic where we're working with the public on the bond they have with their own pet, or we're supporting staff in the work. Some of us work in a private setting where we hang our little shingle out and we see the public and we talk about either the work they do that includes the human-animal bond, or maybe we might be working on the bond they have with their own pet. And a lot of times that's working through grief and loss. And then some of us, just a handful, maybe just a couple dozen, are working in an animal shelter setting like I am. And that can be supporting the staff because like the weight and the pace of the work is really difficult. And also supporting the public in through how they interact with an animal shelter, because an animal shelter is really the community's safety net for pets within that community.
Mhm.
And that really can include a lot of folks within your community, because so many people interact with an animal shelter or animal sheltering within your community. That can be everyone from, do I need to access your services for a food pantry? Do I need to know the rules for how to have a pet, how to walk a pet? What are the rules to tethering a pet in this community? What are the rules to having access to food and water? There's so many ways you have to interact with a pet within your community that an animal shelter is the way that most people interact with those rules and the way that we have pets. There's lots of ways to be a social worker, and then there's lots of ways to be a veterinary social worker. And veterinary social work is still an is still a newer way to be a social worker. So we're still sort of building the plane as we fly it, which can be so exciting and also just a little bit exhausting for those of us who do it. But we've got a great professional organization that supports us. So I find it very exciting to do the work. But it can also be a bit challenging to be newer.
Yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
can. Definitely can. And a question I like to ask all my guests is like, what did you think you were going to be when you were 10? Because odds are you didn't think you were going to be a veterinary social worker. Again, because not that many people have heard of it. So tell me, when you were 10, what did 10-year-old Kelly think she was going to do?
Man, that is a great question. I'm not sure 10-year-old Kelly thought didn't know what she was going to do. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska originally, and so I'm a Midwestern kid. And I think that we weren't very imaginative where I grew up, and we also didn't have a lot of resources. So I think that my school was like, hey, you could be doctors, nurses, lawyers, and teachers. And we are from a pretty blue collar area. So I knew that I wanted to do something. I just wasn't really sure what. And I had a lot of great resources in high school to say, you can be anything. But I was a really indecisive kid. And I was like, oh no, I'm good at stuff and I'm overwhelmed by choices. So I did the thing when people got into college when I went to Nebraska, where I was like, oh, I wish that I was like my friends who wanted to be nurses and teachers because they got on this track and they were like, when you graduate, you're a nurse, or when you graduate, you're a teacher. And I was like, I'm going to take classes in organizational communication. And my parents were like, but what is that? And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't know. So I never really had a clear picture. I think that's one of the reasons I liked shelter work was because I don't know anybody working in a shelter who was like 10-year-old me wanted to work in an animal shelter because I just didn't know anybody who did that work. So I like that idea that we maybe didn't know, and that's how some of us end up here, is that we knew we maybe wanted to help people or help pets, but we didn't know what that looked like. And I certainly didn't live or grow up in an area where people were veterinarians. That wasn't a realistic opportunity for me based on how and where we grew up. So, yeah, I didn't really know any social workers and I didn't really know any veterinarians. So I didn't know this was a real thing.
So take me through then. So you've got organizational communication. And was that your degree or that was like an interest? With the actual degree came out as organizational communication. So there you are with your newly minted degree. Then what?
And I'm being from Nebraska, we have a couple really big companies in town. So I ended up working for ConAgra Foods,
Mhm.
and I had a really great boss who was doing adult-based education and training. So I really quickly fell into adult-based education and training, like onboarding new staff and helping people learn their place in the organization. And I quickly realized, oh, I really love interacting with people, and I really love engaging with people. And I didn't know this was a job. And so I really loved it. But then I bounced around a little bit because I wasn't sure what it could look like. And I tried to go back and get a master's degree, and I wasn't sure if I liked adult-based education and training. And then I had gotten married, and I moved to Arizona. I moved to Phoenix. And while I was married, it was lovely. I was married to someone who made more money, and I was like, oh, my money doesn't matter right now. So this is my chance to try to do something I want to do. And that was my first opportunity to not work a job that had to pay the bills. And can we talk about how poverty really impacts the choices that you get to make
Oh, yeah.
in the jobs that you choose? And because when I have to pay the bills, that really limits the jobs I can take and the days I can work and the ways that I work. So this was my chance to say, well, what do I really want to do? And that was the first time I was like, I want to work a job I want to work. And that was my first job at Arizona Humane Society.
What did you do there?
I was an adoption counselor and I cleaned kennels and I'm sure my parents were like, hi, this brand new college degree that you're using to clean kennels, walk dogs, and place dogs into people's homes. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I thought, oh, I want to work with pets. But a lot of the folks that I worked with only loved working with pets part of it, but I loved working with people as well. But there was no veterinary social work at that time to marry those two ideas. And I felt a little bit odd, like the odd man out, saying, oh, I also really love working with people.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I actually got a job at PetSmart's corporate office, their store support group, which was also based in Phoenix. And that job was called Pet Support Specialist. I worked for Dr. Robin James, who currently still works at PetSmart, but for the charities division. And it was my first time working for a veterinarian. I learned so much, and I really learned to work with people who work for and with pets. And I was like, oh, this is what I really want to do. I want to work with people who love pets. And I didn't even know there was like a pet retail industry. And I just really love that type of work. And that started my journey to be like, okay, so you could support people who love to work with pets. And I just have to figure out how to figure this way into the work.
And so from PetSmart,
Mm-hmm.
what happened then? What made you keep reaching?
Well, I was married to a salesperson who was like, hey, for some more money, we'll move and we'll live somewhere else. And, like all good salespeople, right? And we ended up moving. He tricked me and we went to Portland, Oregon in July. And I was like, this place is amazing. We should live here. And then when we lived here and I moved here and then the winter, I was like, why would we live here? But when we moved here, there was a job opening for a foster care coordinator at the Oregon Humane Society. And I really was impressed by what the Oregon Humane Society had done in animal sheltering. I was amazed at the budget of this place, at the staffing, at the progressiveness of the animal sheltering they were doing. They were one of the first places I ever worked who was saying, hey, we care about adoption numbers, but we really care about keeping people and pets together. And we do that by having a robust foster team. So I got hired as a foster care coordinator because that gave me this opportunity to care about foster parents and supporting foster parents and these foster pets. And I was so excited to do that work. And I did it for like 9 years. And then we moved to Florida and I worked in an open admission shelter, which really gave me an opportunity to work with some wildlife and work with a county contract and see a very different side of animal sheltering in a very different part of the country with understaffed, under-resourced, and funded area of the country. And at that point, I was like, oh, animal sheltering in the Pacific Northwest was much different than animal sheltering in the Southeast. And boy, did that change how I could work and what it meant to be supportive of staff looked so different.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got divorced, I was like, well, now what do I do? And I knew that I wanted to go back to school. And that's when I learned about University of Tennessee Knoxville's program for veterinary social work. And I knew that I had this opportunity with some marital support money and some space and time for some healing for myself after a divorce. I thought this is a great time for me to go back to school and figure out what I really want to do. And it lined up just right for me to do the program for University of Tennessee. And being able to learn with that team, with Dr. Poe and Dr. Strand and people like Serena Manifold, and to learn with that team and figure out what veterinary social work could be, it really opened my eyes to the type of support you could offer in this community. And it really gave me this idea that although there were very few people doing it in animal sheltering at the time, maybe I could do it. I got so excited about it. And then I learned about Janet Hoy Gerlach had published this research paper about having interns in an animal shelter. And I thought, could I get the Oregon Humane Society to do that? Because I was working at the Seattle Animal Shelter managing volunteers. And I thought, if I could talk the Oregon Humane Society into hiring me as an intern while I finished this master's degree, could I talk them into this being a real job somewhere down the road? Because it wasn't really, in 2018, 2019, there just wasn't very many of us yet. And so I got a little nervous that I was like, was this a pipe dream? Could I make it happen?
So the degree was remote, University of Tennessee. You weren't in Tennessee. You were in
Correct.
Seattle?
Yeah, I was in Seattle at the time. And then I moved down to Portland. I got so lucky that the chief medical officer at the Oregon Humane Society, Dr. Steve Kochis, he had already worked at an emergency clinic in Portland called Dub Lewis, and they had a social worker named Enid, who's kind of the original pet loss and grief specialist. Portland already had a robust pet loss and grief support group, and he had worked with a social worker inside of an emergency pet clinic and had seen how much support she had given to staff.
Mm-hmm.
So he met me and said, I know what this could look like in an animal shelter. I see it. And he went to the board at the Oregon Humane Society and said we could build something really special. And because Kelly had worked here for 9 years and she's already built rapport with the staff, we have like this amazing opportunity, and she could be like, we could make something really special here if we would give it a chance. And he really championed the role, like, to build this. It was kind of the stars aligning and me being insanely pushy and him being very bossy. And the two of us really just like mobbing up and being like, it could work. And so I'm so happy that he had already seen that in action and that he believed in me and that I would not stop talking about it because I had already gotten so much good support also from the University of Tennessee. And they were so supportive and they believed in me so much. And they kept saying, you can make this work. You could do this. And I just kept saying, are you sure? Like, I have all this animal sheltering experience, but when I started my master's degree, I didn't have a background in social work. But what I want to remind folks is that animal sheltering and a lot of the helper and care professions that animal sheltering and animal welfare and dog training, a lot of those things we find ourselves in, we are helpers. And a lot of the same principles that I learned in my master's program for social work, I was already doing those things in the professions that I had landed in. I just didn't have the language or the framework to talk about it. I didn't know that I was using some of these techniques for de-escalation with clients. I was using these skills that someone else had taught me in this role. I just didn't know what they were called or why the human brain responded to these things I was doing. So a lot of folks out there, especially folks working in like training and behavior, because they understand training and behavior in animals, they already know how to do these skills and techniques. They just don't always know what they're called in social work or in like human, right, in like human sociology. They just don't always know what they're called.
Yeah.
So
And they
that's
don't
what,
always think to apply them to themselves. Like they have
yeah,
all the skills and then, oh,
yeah,
if I were to
yeah,
treat myself like a dog that I was taking care of, what would I offer myself? Oh,
yeah,
yeah, exercise, rest,
yeah.
nutrition, bonding time.
I do this amazing exercise with our staff, where we sometimes we sometimes just do a handout of Sophia Yin's, like, can you tell this animal is stressed, right?
Yeah.
We also, for our training and behavior team that we have at the Oregon Humane Society, we have these videos for new volunteers that show an animal obviously giving you signs of stress. And we often ask new volunteers and staff, would you enter that animal's kennel? So we show an animal like giving you the whale eye and stiff body and lip licking. And we will show that video and say to that new volunteer, would you leash that dog up for a walk or would you pet that cat? And a volunteer goes, well, no. Right. And we say to them, right, because you didn't know those signs of stress when you first started volunteering, but we taught those to you because we can teach you that. And then sometimes I will show staff a picture of a staff member in the break room having a snack. And I go, hey, would you go ask Dave? Would you go dump on Dave about your day? And they're like, what? And I'm like, would you go dump on Dave about how crappy your day was? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, look at Dave. Like he's tapping his leg really nervously and he's like chugging a Mountain Dew. And I'm like, those could also be signs of stress. But maybe we should teach you what the signs of stress are in yourself and in others. So let's talk about what is an outside stressor? What are your physical reactions to the stress cycle? And it would be foolish for us to think that you would already know what those were because you didn't know what those signs were in an animal before we taught you. Why would you know that
Yeah.
in yourself, right?
And it's not something that we even teach children because we have sort of this perspective of like, well, if I feel mad, it feels like this. So if you feel mad, you probably feel the same. But your mad and my mad might have totally different body experiences. And so um we just don't even know. And it's fascinating when I ask clients about things like that, how they describe them, just amazing and mind-blowing descriptions of bodily sensations that are completely off my map. They're not the way I experience things, but they're absolutely the way that person does. I have a
Mm.
friend who was, in the Navy as an aviator, and she was talking about how they would do the low oxygen deprivation things so that you would learn to recognize your own signs of oxygen deprivation. And for her, one of hers is tingly forearms. And she's like, so now I know tingly forearms. And twice in an actual airplane mission, her arms tingled. And she was like, guys, check the setting. And one time they overruled her. They're like, it's fine. And she was like, my arms are still tingling. And so she's like, no, check again. And then they're like, oh, sorry. And then they fix something. But she said just having that, nobody else on the crew had tingly forearms, but their symptoms would have been something different. But in some of my groups, we talk about like, well, what are your signs that you're a little bit depleted? And for me, one of them is like, I'm super cranky. I crave chocolate and I'll double book myself. Like, these are my things. So if all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I double booked, you might be a little depleted. Or if I'm eating everything in the house because I'm busy telling myself I don't need chocolate, perhaps a little depleted. Go have some chocolate and maybe a walk and some water and a nap. But those might not be your signs.
Yep.
There's a value in knowing, like, these are my yellow zone signs. We don't want to find out what happens if we don't listen to the you must have chocolate now.
Absolutely. And exactly. And we give the pets that we work with, we give them so much grace
Mm-hmm.
and we explain away, um, even when we think about how we view trauma, we are so quick to look at an animal that we know has experienced trauma. And we will say, okay, so this animal we know has been in an environment where they experienced trauma. And I'm just going to go ahead, if I don't know that dog's past, I'm just going to go ahead and, lean in with curiosity and give some grace and assume that the dog probably has experienced trauma. I wish we would give each other that much grace and lean in with that much curiosity because the truth is we're all coming to the table with our own set of experiences and intersectionality of who we are and experiences. And so if we could do that for ourselves in the same way, it would just lend to so much more just grace for each other and
Yeah.
curiosity. And we just as caretakers don't as a default, we don't turn that inward. And it's really difficult. It's so hard to watch our own staff, especially in the shelter setting and in the vet med setting. It's so hard to watch them just be so hard on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So hard to, and I spend a lot of time talking to we have public facing dog trainers here at our shelter, and we also have a behavior modification team. So dog trainers that work internally with dogs and cats who are under behavior modification programs that are available for adoption. And I will go meet with those teams occasionally, and we will talk about a couple things. We'll talk about communication with clients and public facing clients. And we will often talk about what's bothering our staff at the moment. And it's really hard to watch those teams say, well, what I should have known, what I should have asked. And I just stopped people and I was like, well, why would you have known to ask that? And I was like, oh man, that hindsight bias
Yeah.
of judging yourself with that information you have now is real difficult. And it's really hard to hear folks say, well, I get in there and these clients want to talk about how the husband never does this and the wife never does this. And I think as an outsider, it's like that funny meme where as a social worker, there's this meme that goes around where it's like what my mom thinks I do, what the
Mm-hmm.
public thinks I do. And then the joke is that for all of us, the meme is what we really do is paperwork. for all of us. Like, what I really do is fill out case notes. But whenever I ask a team to do that, the dog training teams always surprise me that the amount of no one really understands the amount of people focused work they do.
Yeah.
And it bums me out because it is so misunderstood and they work in silos so much.
Mm-hmm.
Even on our teams where there might only be 2 or 3 of them or 4 of them on a team, when we have 300 plus employees and there might only be 3 or 4 of them on a team. So during the week, they might only see one other person on the scheduled day that they work. So, and I'm a team of 1 at my place.
Yeah.
So I get this working in silos part. It forces you to build community. You have to actually make that an intentional part. I have to make that an intentional part of my support system. I have to join my professional organization, go to our monthly peer support. I have to figure out ways to intentionally build in rest and recovery. And I have to intentionally build support because I don't have that. Like when I was a foster care coordinator, there was 3 others with me every day. So I could just turn to my coworker and be like, can you believe that foster parent? Good Lord. Like, I can't believe she said that to me about a kitten. But I don't have that here as a default. So I have to intentionally figure out how to do that, which is time consuming, but I think it pays off for me because I need that. Like, I know I'm someone who needs that.
Yeah. And knowing what you need is like half the battle. Like,
Oh, so
it's
important.
probably more than half the battle. I saw you. Well, I saw a session you did for the International Association of Veterinary Social Workers conference, and in that you said that you do monthly trainings for the team. So I'm curious. Can you tell me a little bit about why, and then what is the benefit in having this kind of education available to all of the people who work at Oregon Humane?
How lucky am I, right? Like, let me start
Mhm.
off by saying thank you, Oregon Humane Society, for seeing the value in offering unpaid time to staff, an opportunity to take time out of your day to attend a session. So we've got 2 campuses, one in Portland and one in Salem. We're about 45 minutes apart. So we offer one in Portland, one in Salem, like on different days of the week. And then we offer one virtually because we have staff who work part-time from home. Just because, just like every other animal shelter, there's 0 chance we have enough office space to house everybody. So we share offices and people sometimes work from home. So we offer one in Portland, one in Salem, one virtually. So 3 weeks out of the 4-week month, I'm doing one a week. It's the same topic for those. Every month, it's one topic.
Mhm.
April was neurodiversity on teams. But other months we would do conflict, like conflict style, communication. We would do grief and loss in an animal shelter setting. We would talk about things like how to be present during grief and loss, how to also honor grief and loss within teams. We also talk about things like we also do a needs assessment every year for the staff. And that needs assessment is asking them questions like, what do you find challenging about the work? We have demographic questions like, how long you been here? What team are you on? What parts of our employee benefits packages are you using? The EAP, do you use our insurance to see a therapist within our network, outside of our network? Are you using any of our benefits to use the gym? Things like that. But we also ask them, what are the challenging parts of your role? Which of these symptoms are you seeing in yourself? Things like, I'm having trouble sleeping, I'm overeating, I'm not taking care of myself. We're also asking on that same set of questions, what are you seeing in your coworkers? We also don't want it to just be about, can you tell me all the bad crap that's happening for you here? We also say, what are you doing for yourself that seems to be working to take care of yourself? What are the things outside of this work that are really giving you identity and bringing you joy? We're also asking, what maybe are you celebrating about this work? Because we also want to ask, what are the things that are working, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We also ask, like, what are the things you wish people knew about this job that they don't seem to know? And based on that, we also sort of build the year out. to include things. Like the neurodiversity wasn't something we always talked about, but it seems like, and research does seem to support that animal sheltering and vet med, just like human medicine, seem to draw some more neurodiversity to the group. So being able to talk about neurodiversity in an honest way, as and being able to offer some resources on how to talk about it within your team. So as a social worker, we want to talk about it like in a strengths-based approach, but we also don't want to talk about it like ADHD is a superpower and you're superhuman. We want to be like, it also brings challenges with it to the team. But can we flip the script as the narrative and not just talk about it in a deficit language? Can we also talk about how within your team, this may bring some people on your team may have some real strengths to add to your team, right? But can we also put some language around what are the ways that we as a group, as an organization, and as a team might be able to talk about our communication and how are we inclusive with all of the ways that we talk about neurodiversity? So that's April. But again, communication, conflict, boundaries, those are the things most people want to talk about. But we also try to throw in things like change management and transition because stuff's always changing around here. And we try to bring in a little bit of content to give to them. So some real research and like empirical data and structure around that, because people respond well to something that is like well thought out and researched, and some real definitions and hard data. And then we also open it up to discussion. But the number one thing that I really feel strongly about is we want to be sure that people leave with some takeaway for the day. And whether that is a place to go look at something further, we want them to leave with maybe some sort of practical skill or application. Because, I mean, I say this a lot, but when I was an animal shelter worker, going to some sort of talk or training, especially about compassion satisfaction or how hard the work was, it was always really difficult for them to talk about how hard the work was and then just to leave. And no one say, here's how you could make it better or do it better or reflect on what we talked about. It just felt like they would be like, hey, are you feeling bad? And is this hard? And I would be like, yeah, it is. And then they'd be like, all right, we'll go back to work now. And I'd be like, whoa.
Yeah.
You just told me that these are the signs of burnout and compassion fatigue and depression, but you didn't tell me what to do. And even if you're not saying you can make it better, I just share the space with me and say, there are resources for you. Or I see you and I hear you, and we are trying our best to help you, and or here's how we support you.
Yeah.
So we just need something. So we're fortunate to work with an outside counseling firm here that was already working in this space before I got here. They're called Second Growth. They're a counseling firm in Portland, Oregon, and their founder, Kelly Grace, is a marriage and family therapist who was already a foster parent here. And she had witnessed some of the staff really struggling with some stuff. And she had offered some support to the organization. And then when I came on, she was like, hey, I want to partner with you and let's offer some real support to these teams. So her and we make a great team. She's a really great clinician, and I have a really great handle on what's going on inside of this organization. So we make this great team. And then her and I also do support to some outside veterinary clinics and other groups across the country, but also locally in Portland. And I think that this idea that we focus on things that the teams want to know about, but also offer something for them to take away, feels really like substantial to them. And even if it's like a burnout assessment tool with like a reading list, like, and also options, right? Like reading list, TED Talk, podcast, and, like some local hikes and some ways to find a therapist. Like we want to give you a bunch of different things to look at. We just want to make sure that you feel supported, and we want to know what support looks like for you.
I think that's such a great way of summarizing it too. Like we want you to feel supported, and we want to know what support looks like for you because it is different for each of us. And the only way to know that is to ask. One of my husband's phrases is, help is defined by the recipient. I come from a family of very dedicated helpers. And my my family has helped my husband in many ways that he does not want to be helped. And um, help is defined by the recipient is a valuable, like, noticing, like, "Oh, you're right. You're right. That might have been helpful only to whomever." But this idea of what does support look like for you when we're playing guessing games of like, "Well, here's what you need." It never lands right even if it is right, because it kind of takes away this, I don't know, respect of your own awareness of what is right for you. Um, so I love that you're doing this. I wish I could just come to all your sessions because it sounds completely up my alley and, actually really aligned with some of the programs that I offer as well. So, the nosy part of me is like, "Let me just do those too." Um, when you think about your team, what do you think matters most to them with the fact that you do offer this? Like, it's like if we just like popped you out and we didn't replace you, what would happen?
This is a great question. I think that we just did our yearly reviews at work, right? And you have these moments during when you write your own self-assessment where you think, what is it I say I do around here? Like it's an office space moment where I'm like, what is it I say I do here? Um, I think that for the teams that I support, just the idea of having me is very important. The idea that Oregon Humane Society cares enough about the mental health and well-being of the team and that they recognize that the work that we ask the staff to do does in fact cause trauma and harm to them because of the nature of the work, not because of how we do it.
Right.
Recognizing that there is a weight and a pace to the work because of the nature of the work, I think that that's sometimes the most important thing.
Hmm.
And I think that we allow them to access resources on paid time and that some of the tools we offer them are paid tools. Like the fact that we offer them the employee assistance, like that's paid benefit, right? Also, we as an organization have a learning and development team. They decided last year and they've just re-upped their contract with Jessica Dolce's Compassion and
Hmm.
Balance program. So we've subscribed to that as a shelter now. And teams are utilizing that. And I'm also utilizing that with our team training. That feels like the organization is invested in providing those tools. So I think that the fact that, yes, you can come sit with me for 20 minutes and we can debrief if we've had a traumatic animal death. I am trained in that and I'm going to hold space for you. So I think that they would miss like the logistical part where a trained mental health clinician is here when we need that. Or the fact that I've trained our staff and introduced them to the Portland Street Response, which is our version of 911 mental health to come out. Like our front facing staff now know how to use social services because I've connected them to social services. So I have logistically done that.
Hmm.
So I think they would miss that logistical part. But more importantly, I think that they would miss the idea that this place cares about them enough to invest in combating what this work does to them
Yeah.
because of how hard the work is.
Yeah. And every time we lose somebody with years of experience, we lose more than a body doing a job. We lose all that history and that knowledge and creativity. And it's just so sad to see people go, nope, can't do it anymore. Done. I am done. And that happens more often than we would like in these fields. So if I could give you a magic wand and you're going to grant a wish, a blessing upon us all, what would you give us? All pet professionals.
Ooh, I think just a little more self compassion.
Mm.
Yeah. I think that I would love for us to be able to turn the compassion that we offer the rest of the world towards ourselves, especially when we view the way that we view failure, the way that we call things a failure,
Mhm.
is really hard for me to sometimes watch. even the way that we talk about leaving for the day, putting down boundaries, things that we would in abstract consider healthy things. I think that if I pull aside any one person from these teams and let's talk about a healthy boundary, right? Let's talk about this dog in abstract. We are able to really have a healthy conversation about it. But when I put you with a group of our peers, or I put you within an organization or within a team, and we also talk about it in the context of our work, we often have a hard time we have a hard time showing compassion to ourselves, pulling ourselves out of kind of the spin of what we think. And it's really difficult. I fall to that as well. It's very hard.
It's going to be fixed because you just used the wand. We're all getting it. We are all getting this new dose of self-compassion. Compliments of Kelly Bremkin.
Colleen, I would have come on earlier. I just didn't know that's what we needed.
Yeah, that's what we needed. We needed it, and we're grateful for it, and we appreciate you. If people wanted to learn more about you and your work, Kelly, how could they do that?
They can learn more about my work at the Oregon Humane Society's website, which is oregonhumane.org. Or they can find out more about the work I do with Second Growth at secondgrowthcounseling.com. Those are great ways to learn about my work. Also, the International Association of Veterinary Social Work is a wonderful professional organization that highlights the work of myself and other social workers across the world for just the impact we're having on all types of work, including animal sheltering, which is near and dear to my heart.
Thank you so much. Thank you for talking with me today, Kelly. This has been awesome.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to Unleashed at Work and Home. I invite you to come learn more at ColleenPilar.com, where you can be steady, be strong, and be long.